right, in this section, we're going to talk about solving equations that are absolute value equations. So just as a little refresher on absolute value is a number's distance away from zero. So now we're going to be working with equations with that absolute value symbol. So let's look at here. So we have the absolute value of x is equal to 7, and we ask ourselves, well, what could x be? Well, x could be either 7 or negative 7, right? And on our number line, it would look like this. We have a 7 or a negative 7. So those would be their locations on the absolute value, or on the number line. So if we look at our first equation here with absolute value, we have the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 20. Okay, so here's how we do this. Just like in our example above, we knew that we could have two different answers for the absolute value of x is equal to 7. We could have the 7 or the negative 7. We had to take into account the negative side and the positive side. Well, just like that, we have to do this as well with this type of equation. So anytime I have an absolute value equation, I always break it into case 1 and case 2. Case 1 will look like this. I'm going to take the problem x plus 7 and I'm going to set it equal to 20. Basically, I lose my absolute value bars. And for my case 2, I'm going to take my x plus 7 and I'm actually going to set it equal to negative 20. I changed my 20 to a negative. I want to account for both the positive and the negative pieces of an absolute value problem. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and solve it just like I normally would. And then on my other side, I would go ahead and subtract 7. So you'll notice that my answer to this problem actually gives me two answers. And what that means is x in my problem could equal 13 or x could equal negative 27. Both of those numbers are going to give me a final answer of 20. All right, let's look at another one. Now this one has one additional piece to it. It has the plus 3 outside of the absolute value bars. Before you break any problem down into case 1 and case 2, you have to eliminate that piece that's tacked on outside. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly eliminate him just by subtracting him from both sides. Once you get to that point where there's nothing outside of the absolute value bars, at that point you are ready to break it into your case 1 and your case 2 so that you account for your positives and that you account for your negatives. All right, my case 1 is going to be x minus 4, and that's going to be equal to 5. My case 2, this is where things change. I'm going to say x minus 4 is equal to negative 5. I changed my positive to a negative. And now I'm simply going to go ahead and I'm going to solve these one-step equations. One of my numbers that I can substitute into my equation is 9. And the other number is going to be negative 1. So those two numbers I can substitute back into my equation, and both the left-hand side should be equal to the right-hand side. Now you can do a quick mental check of these just to make sure that you are correct. Okay, let's move on to some more. Now I've added some more operations on the outside of the equation. On the outside of the absolute value bars. I have a negative 8 being multiplied by the absolute value of n over 3 and then minus 4. So I want to ask myself, do I get rid of the negative 8 or the negative 4? I'm always going to get rid of the number that's like the furthest away. So in our case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 4. I'm going to get rid of that 4, get him out of the way. So I'm left with negative 8 absolute value, n over 3. My additive inverses are going to cancel out, and they're going to be equal to negative 8. But I still have a negative 8 there, so I have to get rid of him. Right now he's being multiplied, so I'm going to go ahead and divide him by negative 8. So those 8s are going to eliminate, and I'm left with n over 3 is equal to 1. Finally, at this point, you can go ahead and break it into your case 1 and case 2. My case 1 is going to be n over 3 equals 1, and my case 2 is going to be n over 3 equals negative 1. Go ahead and simply solve this by multiplying both sides by 3. And I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 over on this side too. So the two numbers that I could use in this absolute value equation is 3 and negative 3. Let's look at another. Now I have negative 7 plus 3. I have those two numbers outside. Again, I want to get rid of that number that is furthest away and not being multiplied. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I'm going to get rid of those 7s. Okay, and I have a 3 outside as well, so I'm going to go ahead and divide him so that I can eliminate him. So the 3 is gone as well, and now I'm left with 2k plus 4 equals 2. At this point, now that I have nothing outside of the absolute values, now this is my case 1 and my case 2. Okay, my first case is going to be 2k plus 4 is equal to 2. And my case 2 is going to be 2k plus 4 equals negative 2. The only thing that's different is that last negative. And I just have a simple two-step equation to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides, and my answer will be negative 1. So case 1 is negative 1. And if I go ahead and work out my other side, the other number that will satisfy this absolute value equation will be negative 3. So those are the two numbers that I can substitute in for k to make the left side of the equation equal the right side. All right. Let's look at one more thing now. Now, can you have a negative absolute value? Meaning, can I have a number that is inside my absolute value symbol equal a negative number? And you'll probably say to yourself, no. The only way I could do that is to put a negative outside of the absolute value. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about, can you put something inside the absolute value to make it negative? And the answer is no. So I want you to take a look at this first example here. Do you notice first how my right-hand side is negative? Okay, well, that might kind of spur your attention, immediately, but don't be too quick to think that there's something, that this is not going to work. Let's first go ahead and eliminate anything that is getting in the way of my cases. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 5 first. Okay. So I'm left with 5, absolute value of 7x minus 1 is equal to negative 40. Okay? And now I'm going to go ahead and divide by 5 real quick. When I do that, my 5's eliminate, and I'm left with 7x. Absolute value 7x minus 1 is equal to negative 8. Now that you've gotten down to this point, take a look. I have a negative number on the right-hand side, and I also have the absolute value on the left. There is no number that I can put in for x to make the absolute value equal a negative. It's just not possible. So for this answer, there is no solution. Now, going back to that idea of the negative 35 in the beginning, the reason I stressed that was because you can't just necessarily look at that number and think, oh, if there's no solution. And let me show you why. Let's look at the next problem. Right now I have a negative 5, and I think to myself, oh, it might be a no solution. But remember, you always have to take care of everything outside of the absolute value first before you solve it. So let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. Notice how my number changed to a positive? So don't always look at that negative and think, oh, it's no solution. You got to be really careful because it can actually be positive. So let's go ahead and break this one into our case 1 and case 2. I'm going to have x minus 3 is equal to 3, and I'm going to have x minus 3 is equal to negative 3. And I'm going to simply solve that out to get x equals 6. And I'm going to solve the other one out as well to give me x is equal to 0. So Going back to the no solution one, there is no solution to this problem. There are no numbers that can actually, be substituted into the equation to give you an absolute value. So there's also no way to check it because there's no answer. So this is one of those ones where you really just need to make sure that you did your steps properly in order to check your work. And that is the end of our absolute value section.